This is A Shock in the Dark. I'm a 38-year-old man. I'm married, have 2 kids. I work for the U.S. government and live on the border of Virginia and Maryland. I'm not a senator or anything. You've never heard my name, and I actually don't do anything very cool yet. My position requires that I undertake a drug test and a psychological evaluation several times a year. In other words, I'm not a drugged-out, crazy person. Believe me, I've questioned my own sanity over this, and I'm convinced that I've experienced something supernatural. Now follow me on this thought. The thing that happened to me is so insignificant that I have determined that the only purpose this could possibly serve is to send me a message. The only alternative I can come up with is that it's some kind of universal accident, like a crack in reality. However, I do believe it's a message, but I have no idea what this message is. Here's what happened. My wife and I were celebrating our 10th anniversary on August 5th, and we decided to take time off for 3 days and treat ourselves to a nice staycation at an upscale hotel in Washington, D.C. We have a nanny who is going to stay at our house while we're gone, and she's going to take care of the kids and our cat, who our son named Steve. We say goodbye to everybody and head out driving to the hotel. We're traveling light since we're basically only staying 20 minutes away from our house and plan to spend most of our time in our room or the hotel spa. So, our only luggage is a medium-sized backpack I've got absolutely stuffed with the bare essentials. On the way to the hotel, we stop and pick up a nice dinner from one of our favorite restaurants so we can enjoy that in our room while we relax and watch a movie. We get to the hotel, the valet takes our car, and the concierge asks for our bags, but we decline since it's just a backpack. We check in at the front desk, get our key, take the elevator up, and get inside our room. I set up our dinner on the bed and start scrolling through the movies while my wife changes into her robe. 2 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. I look out the peephole and see it's room service delivering a bottle of champagne I had arranged for me and my wife. The moment I open the door, our cat, Steve, runs into the room from the hallway. My mind cannot comprehend what just happened. I'm thinking maybe I'm having a stroke. But no, because the room service guy starts apologizing profusely and saying he had no idea where that cat came from. We start looking under the bed and we're calling for Steve when my wife comes out of the bathroom looking at me and looking at the service guy down on all fours, and I'm calling for our cat that we just left behind at our house. Then she screams. I look up and she's waving her hands at her face nervously like she's trying to cool herself off or something, and she's dancing around on her tippy toes for some reason. "Oh my God, is that Steve?" she says. I shout at her, Where is he?" And she points under the chair at the desk in the room. We look, no cat. We looked everywhere. No cat. Finally, the server left, and that was it. We stayed in our room for at least the next 18 hours without leaving, and spent 3 days total there, and never saw the cat again. Look, I would recognize my cat anywhere, but There are two things that make me absolutely certain that it was our cat. Number one, he's missing a piece of his right ear. No idea why he was like that when we adopted him. And number two, he's got a very unique collar. Basically, it looks like a studded leather thing that makes him look like a punk rocker from the 70s. We called the house, and the cat was fine. In fact, he's still fine today. That eliminates the ghost cat theory, but I refuse to believe that this is some kind of mistake that the universe made, like a bad copy and paste job that accidentally left us with two cats. I'm not going to start talking like this at work, but I believe that this is a message. I know it is. But what could this possibly mean? I grew up in a very small town here in Wisconsin, where just about everybody knew just about everybody. I had just turned 17 years old and bought my first car with my allowance, grass-cutting earnings, and the birthday money I'd been saving since I was 10. It was a used car. It had a bad paint job, could use some new upholstery, but it was pretty fast, and it was mine. I was dating a girl who lived 2 towns over. It was about a 45-minute drive straight down a 2-lane highway all the way to her house. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I liked the girl or the drive to her house more. I didn't need to be racing or anything. I just loved driving. I was driving home from my girlfriend's house about midnight one night when a car came up behind me. It was going extremely fast. It was a giant, beat-up old yellow Cadillac about the size of a yacht. It was one of those huge ones they made in the 70s. This guy got right up on me and was riding my bumper and flashing his high beams at me and kind of swerving a little back and forth from lane to lane. At first I slowed down a bit because it looked like he wanted to pass me, but he refused. And me slowing down just seemed to make him angrier. There wasn't a shoulder I could pull off on. It was all grass and ditches that were a few feet deep. Besides, I didn't need to pull over. I was 17 and invincible. So, even though I was already going over the speed limit, I just sped up. But this guy stayed right on my bumper. I sped up even more, but still, he was just inches behind me, flashing his lights and honking his horn and getting closer and closer to my rear end. I continued to increase my speed until I'm going near 100 miles per hour. That's around 161 kilometers for everybody not in the U.S. It was a pitch black, 2-lane highway. No real turnoffs or driveways anywhere, just a highway through a forest. Usually when you brake check somebody, you just suddenly slam on the brakes and the person has no choice but to react in a drastic way. And this guy obviously needed a brake check. But even though I was young and stupid and invincible, I didn't want to kill him and me. So, the best I can describe it is, I pressed the brake pedal down so I would slow down very quickly. The car behind me swerved off the road and into the grass and just spun around and around, slipping around in all that tall grass. I took this opportunity to floor it and get away. To make sure I'd made a clean getaway, I drove 100 miles an hour for about 10 minutes when I finally saw a good hiding spot. I figured that guy might come looking for me to run me off the road, so my plan was to hide until he eventually passed by. Then I could slowly start making my way home again. So this hiding spot I saw was a closed-down gas station off to my left. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. The pumps were all rusty. One of the windows was smashed, but it was really an awesome spot to hide. It's funny, I didn't seem to ever remember it on any of my trips to or from my girlfriend's house before. I quickly pulled around to the back of the station, to the perfect spot, where he couldn't see me as he approached the gas station. But I could view the road just past the gas station and see when he had passed by. I turned my lights off, I turned the engine off, and I just sat there in the pitch black, eerie silence. I sat there for about 10 minutes, then 20 minutes. And still, not one single car had passed by. I started thinking that maybe he had turned off on another road that I didn't know about or something, but I was not about to leave my perfect hiding spot. I would just have to wait there all night if that's what it took. So I just waited. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning at this point, and after my adrenaline dump, I was getting pretty tired. So I rolled down my windows to get some fresh air. I listened, but I didn't hear any cars heading down the highway. All I could hear were the crickets that inhabited the forest behind the old gas station. I leaned the seat back a little bit, and while I was adjusting my seat, I did two other things at the same time. I accidentally put my foot on the brake pedal and glanced in my rearview mirror. My brake lights lit up the entire area, a bright blood red light. And in my rearview mirror, it was the Cadillac, parked right behind me. How did I miss him pulling up? As my right hand reached for the ignition, I quickly glanced up to my open car window, and there was the driver. A dirty-looking man, about 45 to 50 years old, mean-looking, angry-looking, shirtless, all lit up in that blood-red light. Oh, and he was absolutely ripped. He started screaming at me and cussing me out. I could smell the cigarettes and vodka on his breath. Foam was actually coming out of his mouth. He was about to explode. This next part, in my memory, is in slow motion. It's almost dreamlike, but I will tell you what happened from my perspective. I saw this man, in slow motion, lift up his fists like a boxer. He slowly, slightly leaned in my direction while also moving towards me. And suddenly, he was moving slowly away from me. I couldn't figure out how he suddenly had blood on his fists. About that same time, I noticed my face was completely numb. Everything returned to normal speed. I felt warm liquid down my face, dripping off my chin. I was confused, but I understood then that my nose was broken, and I was bleeding real bad. Apparently, he had pummeled my face in real good. In fact, so good that I had momentarily, just a second or two, lost consciousness. Unfortunately, when I get nervous, I have a strange tic. My natural reaction to being nervous is to laugh. And I was really nervous, so I laughed really hard. This guy was apparently not familiar with my condition because he took it personally. The man then shouted back to his car. I don't know what the exact words were, but it was something very close to, "Come on, boys! This kid needs an attitude adjustment." In my rearview mirror, I could see two large young men, I rightfully assumed at the time were his sons, getting out of the car. One had a baseball bat, the other had a tire iron. In one smooth motion, I immediately cranked the engine, threw the car into gear, and peeled out in a cloud of dust and small rocks. I spun the car around,
drove right behind the man's car and stopped just long enough to memorize his license plate. When he realized what I was doing, the man and his boys started charging at me. I floored it, and I am ashamed to say, I drove at extremely dangerous speeds to get home. When I eventually got home, making sure I wasn't followed, my mom saw that my nose was broken and freaked out. That woke up my dad, who came in and turned on the lights. Not only was my nose broken and my face caked in thick blood, both my eyes were black, and my face was swollen real bad, and I had a cut right above my left eye. I had to tell my parents the whole story. My dad was friends with the chief of police in our town. They actually had gone to school together, so Dad called the chief at home. I gave him the car's license number and description. The chief told Dad he would get on it immediately. I was still hanging out with my parents in the kitchen, my mom carefully cleaning the blood off my face and putting ice on my eyes, when the police chief called back about 30 minutes later. My dad answered the phone, talked to the chief for a minute, and hung up. Here's what my dad said. Well, we have to drop this. If we really want to do something about it, the police will pick him up. But the chief says we should think about just forgetting about it. I was confused. Why? Why would we let this guy get away with it? He needs to learn a lesson. He's just going to end up doing it to somebody else, I told my dad. What my dad said still freaks me out to this day. Well, I'll leave it to you, son, and I will back you up no matter what you decide. But Chief says he looked up the registration of that Cadillac, and he is very familiar with the guy who beat you up. Chief says he and his two boys are rough characters. That man you met tonight just got out of prison last week for killing his wife with a hammer. No joke. Now, at that time, I didn't know you could ever get out of prison if you killed somebody with a hammer, but yeah, it's possible. It happened. It was because of that night that I changed the way I drive. I had all the tendencies, but had not quite developed into an aggressive driver. That night ensured that I never did. And I'm probably alive today because of it. When you're anonymous, whether you're behind a keyboard or behind a wheel, it's easy to think you're Mr. Tough Guy. You know, invincible. But all that can change in an instant when you run across somebody who's got nothing to lose. I guess the moral of the story is, when you're on the road, you never know who you're dealing with. Every car that you pass or passes you is another chance to play road rules Russian roulette. And you have no idea what kind of day the other guy had, or what they've experienced in their life, or where they're going, or how they may be equipped. And with any luck, you'll never know what they are capable of doing to another human being.
Dear Mr. Shock, you can call me Miss Mel. I am 72 years old, but I am not an old woman. I'm also not 72 years young. I hate it when people say that. That only means you are so old that saying the word old around you is an obvious insult. In my long life, I've been blessed enough to serve in the United States Navy. I am a wartime vet, and when I came back to the States, I became a police officer and eventually the first female police sergeant for a large American city. I won't mention the city, as that would give me away. You will understand why I don't want to do that. I was also a teacher for many, many years. I currently run 2 miles every single day and volunteer 5 days a week at a women's shelter near my home. All of this is to say, I am not some helpless, lonely old lady who needs attention. I do, however, need your help. In October of 1999, my husband of over 25 years died. It took me a while, but eventually I finally decided I needed to go through his belongings to see what I might donate to Goodwill and what I might want to give to my grandkids. But I just couldn't do it. I felt like I would be getting rid of a piece of him. Almost 5 years later, I finally talked myself into going through his things. But there was still one room that I didn't go through. In fact, I had not entered this room since way before my husband's death. This one particular room had been shut and locked for well over 20 years. Well, last weekend, I finally decided it was time. This room belonged to my husband. While he was still alive, he had made a home office, like a study, right over the garage. Everyone in the family knew we were not allowed to go into his office ever, for any reason. I know that's probably not seen as acceptable by young people today, but I really never minded. I had a great respect for my husband and a great trust. If he wanted a room to call his own, I never had a problem with it. In fact, I had my sewing room. Of course, everyone was welcome in my sewing room anytime, but that was my decision. If I wanted my own private study, I would have had one. And if my husband wanted privacy, a room to find peace, I fully supported that. Now, I'm thinking that could have been a huge mistake. My husband and I were married for just over 25 years, and I believe we knew each other as well as any two people ever could. But while I was going through his office, I ran across a few items that caused me some concern. I don't know if these things are popular and well-known or trendy items, or if they're obscure. I don't even know how serious these items are, so I thought I would ask you and the people who listen to you in hopes of someone having some information. I want to know, do people use these things, or is it an academic thing? That is to say, are these books meant to be educational, or are they more like how-to manuals? Any information is appreciated. For example, I found what appears to be a very old leather-bound book. It has absolutely no publishing information, but just judging by the looks and condition, I would guess it's maybe from the mid-1800s, possibly as late as 1900. It is called Grimorium Verum. It's frightening to look at, so I haven't spent much time looking at it, but it appears to show how to do rituals or spells and possibly conjuring spirits and the like. Then I ran across another scary-looking book called Conjurer les Travailleurs Demoniaques, and another one called Magicae Diaboli. That one, Magicae Diaboli, has the most wicked and evil-looking hand-drawn depictions of terrible, despicable things, unnatural things, and the ugliest animal perversions and disgusting-looking human-like animals. To be fair, there are also elaborate paintings of beautiful angels, but even then, the angels are usually doing things you wouldn't expect angels to do. There's one painting that I can't get out of my mind. It's this beautiful angel with a sword. He has just beheaded a young, small person and is drinking blood from an elaborate golden goblet. and the blood is just dripping everywhere down his robes. I just got the chills writing this down. For whatever reason, that image of that angel just keeps popping back into my mind at random times throughout the day and at night when I'm trying to sleep. Further searching through his office revealed other things that I would think are black magic or possibly Santeria or voodoo related, like lots and lots of black candles, a velvet bag with what I'm hoping is dog or maybe monkey bones. There are various small bundles of what I think is human hair, tiny boxes of fingernail clippings, lots and lots of tiny bottles full of foul-smelling liquids that are very thick, or various colored powders. And now I'm crying again. Not grief exactly, it's just obvious to me, and it breaks my heart, that apparently I didn't know my own husband at all. I think about our most intimate conversations, and that man that I was married to is so far away from whoever this person is. How could he do this to me? How could he do this to me? He was my best friend, or I believed he was. I apologize for getting off track, but this has been difficult beyond what anyone can imagine. I've seen a lot of shocking things in my life, done things that I will take to my grave, and I've met evil people who have done very evil deeds, so I'm sure I can work through this sadness that I feel, but that's not my only problem. After finding all these things, I decided just to get rid of them all. I bagged them all up, and on Monday, the garbage truck carried it all away. That night, as I got into bed, the most disgusting smell filled the entire house. I recognized that smell immediately. It's an odor you never forget. It's the same odor that gets stuck in your sinuses after investigating a murder scene. It's the smell of death. Since that happened Monday night, nothing else has happened. But I am looking for information on the items I found and someone who knows about this stuff to advise me. Do I need to have my house cleansed? Thank you for being a resource. I don't know where I would turn otherwise. God bless you, and thank you for helping me. Your fan, your friend, Miss Mel.